Welcome to the Human Nature Channel. I'm your host, Alex Tamsula, and what am I doing here? Well, it's Tuesday night once again here at my dad's farm garage / video production facility. Actually, it's more than that. It's a destination. Every Tuesday, I hop in my car and I star in my own little mind movie, Escape from Pittsburgh. I get up here at about 4 in the afternoon. After dropping some stuff off at the house, I come down to the garage and Dad's already here. I make 2 cups of coffee, pull up a chair, and we yak for the next hour and a half. I enjoy spending time with my dad. I want to spend as much time with him as I can at this stage of our lives. Oh, he'll even say, hey, why don't you stay home this week and work on your videos? And I says, no, it's okay, I'm coming up. He has macular degeneration of what they call the dry type, which means there's no treatment for it. He's so blind that he can no longer read. And he'll say this to me. He says, I miss reading. I even miss reading the bills. Now you can see where I get my sense of humor. So after we spend the late afternoon together, he goes back down to the house, and suddenly I have the place to myself. And let's just hop into some Las Vegas shooting truth community yak, because that's really why you're here. I have seen this in some videos, and I've seen this in some comments to some videos, where people make a big deal about Stephen Paddock not having any hearing protection, or not having any eye protection. And I'm like, what are you talking about? When it comes to looking into mass shooters, is this your first rodeo? Show me, please, another mass shooter that used hearing protection or eye protection. I mean, if they did, I don't know about it. I assume they don't. Because, like, for example, Omar Mateen and the Pulse nightclub shooting, I don't believe he had any of this because he knew he wasn't coming home. In future Las Vegas shooting videos, when I talk about Stephen Paddock, this is the direction I'm going to take. Stephen Paddock knew he wasn't coming home. Somewhere, there was a point of no return where his fate was sealed. His fate being dead on the floor of a hotel room in Mandalay Bay of a self-inflicted gunshot wound, surrounded by semi-automatic weapons, and outside, dead and wounded at a music festival. That was his fate. At what point was it assured? Because all the people are trying to find really strange ways of trying to say that Stephen Paddock didn't do this seem to forget one fundamental fact. Whatever it was, he was in this up to his fucking eyeballs. What is the matter with you people? Get it through your thick skulls. He was involved. Alrighty, well, now that I've gotten that off my chest, there's always something interesting here in my dad's garage. What can I show you tonight? What we have here is a slow cooker. And what's inside? Oh, all sorts of stuff. Looks good. There's carrots, there's corn, there's peas, there's rice, there's green beans, and of course there's kielbasa. Oh my goodness, look at this. Dad had a bowl of this stuff, and he's like, you know what? Something's missing. And I'm like, what are you talking about, something's missing? Everything I can think of is in there. And he said, ketchup. I'm like, okay. Anyway, I'm going to go have myself a bowl of this. Well, I think I have everything I need. I have an empty sour cream container with a staple stuck to the side. That's because there's a magnet inside there. The reason my dad has a magnet inside an empty sour cream container is so that he can run this through the ashes inside what I think is called the ash box below the furnace beside me. And getting staples out of the ashes makes the ashes easier to dispose of. Oh! I happen to have an old-fashioned coffee percolator here, complete with the glass top in the lid. You know, when I was a little kid, I may have seen this thing in action. Put your coffee in there, fill it full of water, put it on the stove, turn on the heat, and eventually you're going to have coffee burbling in this little glass top. If this old-fashioned percolator could speak, it might say, "You know what you can do with your French press." I have a pair of goggles without a strap. Oh, this is a non-starter. And finally, we have Irv. Irv almost didn't make it up this week. The reason being that his travel container happened to be filled with leftover angel hair pasta from Saturday night. Well, about an hour before I'm getting ready to leave, Irv turns to me and he says, "Hey, you're not leaving me behind." So what I had to do was transfer all that angel hair pasta into empty sour cream containers. No, Irv wants everybody to know that he runs the show. I'm his assistant. Mr. Irv, it's time for your close-up. Here at the Human Nature Channel, we cover politics and true crime. Come to think of it, what's the difference? First, a few things I'd like to tell you about. Right now, I've opened accounts on both Subscribestar and BitChute. As of now, I have only a few videos over at either place. Subscribestar, by way of example, recommends uploading only twice weekly to avoid overwhelming your subscribers. Since I'm at 55 videos, this could take a while. But I set up at Subscribestar because it's an easy way to contribute to the Send Alex to Las Vegas fund. Nassim Nicholas Taleb, in his book The Black Swan, describes how to play roulette like a hedge fund manager, and I'm anxious to try that out. Now with BitChute, it's a different story. I plan on uploading all my videos there as fast as I can, but the problem is my earlier videos are not formatted properly, so I have to go back and take care of this. But as you can see, I'm expanding to other places. The writing may be on the wall when it comes to a future on YouTube. I want to look into Dailymotion, which I believe is a French site, and I would also like to mention a hot tip by way of Mr. Visual with his Video 38 LBRY recommendation. As Mr. V describes it, LBRY, pronounced library, is an archiving platform that mirrors your channel. Sounds intriguing. I may have to skip next week's LVS video to get a handle on this. Next, we'll pick up with last week's theme of Stephen Paddock and his yen for prostitutes. Earlier this week, I had a very interesting video brought to my attention. It's an episode of the Australian version of A Current Affair, and it's the Adam Fevre interview on Stephen Paddock. Australian businessman Fevre told A Current Affair he vacationed with Paddock on 3 separate occasions. In 2013, Fevre lived with a sister of Mary Lou Danley, and one time he and sister Lisa visited Mary Lou and Paddock in Las Vegas, Paddock paying for the suite they stayed in. Adam says Paddock told him the perks of high rollers extended 2 free call girls, and in what amounted to locker room banter, Paddock admitted he had said yes to some of those offers. Adam Lefevre also said he visited Paddock at his Mesquite, Nevada home and saw the gun room. Lefevre admits he has a tough time wrapping his mind around how this man he knew could be involved in something like the Las Vegas shooting, and he specifically questions how one person could manage to get all those guns into a hotel room like 32-135 without somebody knowing, somebody being suspicious. How indeed. So believe it or not, with all this time spent looking into the Las Vegas shooting, which also involves looking at the phenomenon known as Las Vegas, I've started gambling. My game of chance is this silly machine called Bonus Hole. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a game where you gamble with quarters. At the top is a sliding slot. You can move it from left to right or back again, and it gives the illusion that you have some kind of control. You drop a quarter into the slot and it lands on the back end of a metal platform moving forwards and backwards, and it is always covered in quarters. Every quarter you drop in, if it lands right, pushes other quarters off the platform. Kind of reminds me of YouTube. The quarters that fall from the moving platform land on a stationary platform, also covered in quarters and mixed with bills in denominations of 5, 20, 50, and 100. In the center is a hole through which an individual quarter can fall through. That's the bonus hole, and pays off when there's $15 worth of quarters in the till. On the other hand, the lower deck quarters that don't fall in the bonus hole are slowly nudged off this lower platform by the moving metal one, and sooner or later fall into a long, narrow trap and down into the payout window, sometimes taking one of those bills with it. There's also a handwritten note taped to the machine that says, "Don't bump the machine." I have won money at this thing. I got a $20 bill one time. I also hit the bonus hole payout. What makes the game enticing and addicting is that the quarters bunch up on either side of the lip over the trap, quarters sticking out like rock chips in a shale cliff, and damn if they don't look as if they're going to fall into that trap at any second. Of course, they rarely do. I'll only play $5 at a time, which lets you play for a while since you are regularly getting 1, 2, or 3 quarters as a payout. I'll play until I've had 2 payouts of around $1.50, or to put it another way, I'll play until I've dumped $2.50 into the machine. When I've gotten my $2.50 back or more, then I call it a day. This is much better than putting a $20 bill into the machine and playing until it's all gone, which I've done. The trick is knowing when to walk away. So why am I going into such great detail about my newfound gambling Jones? Because I had a crazy thought. My crazy thought is, you can't begin to understand Stephen Paddock unless you gamble. Yes, I know video poker is a much more complicated game than something as simple-minded as bonus hole, but we're still talking about gambling. And you'll never get inside Stephen Paddock's head unless you know the highs and lows of wagering. You can't get on his wavelength unless you understand the meaning behind the phrase, "money won is twice as sweet as money earned." Quick, what movie is that from? The origins of the Las Vegas shooting begin with Stephen Paddock's relationship to gambling. Some people have tried to separate the gambling from the shooting as if one had nothing to do with the other, but I don't think that's possible. Las Vegas itself and gambling culture in general, with its grip on Stephen Paddock, took him on a tortured path resulting in the Route 91 Harvest Festival massacre. It's not a clear path, but gambling as a mitigating circumstance is too in your face to be dismissed. The path is there, and it's the path of somebody who forgot the trick of knowing when to walk away. There are some final things I'd like to say about the Daily Mail article I read to you last week concerning Stephen Paddock and the hooker. Eric Peters sent me a link to the Sun article that did the original reporting on the story. I'll leave that link in the notes. It's interesting to compare the two news pieces. The hooker story in both articles is pretty much the same, although the Daily Mail took the story and made it into a cut and paste exercise, like I described. But in the article from The Sun, we get a time frame that the Daily Mail neglected to mention, where Paddock and the call girl met around 9 times from November 2015 to June 2016, and we learned she was leaving an abusive relationship and believed Paddock seemed like he wanted to help. An interesting example of how different news outlets handle the Las Vegas shooting, and thank you, Eric, for bringing this to my attention. While I was thinking about the motive that Stephen Paddock surely had for committing the Las Vegas shooting, I thought of a corollary issue, one I mentioned in the beginning of this video. The issue is, was there a point of no return for Stephen Paddock? Was there that one moment where Paddock had completely made up his mind that he was going to kill, and when could that have been? Was there any dithering on his part before that point of no return? Not sure if he really wanted to go through with this. Right now, I don't know the answers to these questions. Working backwards from the start of the Las Vegas shooting, you could argue the true point of no return was the moment Paddock opened fire. Up until that point, he still had a choice. But once the shooting started, whatever was going to happen to Stephen Paddock was going to happen. Early on, Sheriff Joe Lombardo opined that maybe Paddock had an escape plan, an assertion later contradicted by the FBI, which became just one more overtied knot in the official story. It seems a fanciful idea that Paddock imagined escape in some kind of life after committing the largest mass shooting in modern United States history. Even in the unlikely event he had escaped, it wouldn't have taken long to figure out who was the guest in room 32135, and Paddock would have suddenly been on the FBI's 10 most wanted list, probably at the very top, doing Dear Old Dad one better. I have a tough time believing any of that. So, for my purposes, I'm just going to assume Stephen Paddock reached a point where he knew, ultimately, he was a dead man. In future videos, I'm going to be talking about where on his path to the Las Vegas shooting that may have occurred. Eric Peters and I, in numerous YouTube comment exchanges, have gone back and forth about Paddock's motive. When it comes to a possible motive, the idea that Stephen Paddock was out to extract revenge against the casinos is something Eric really isn't buying. I myself have felt it was an unsatisfying explanation because it left too much unexplained. It doesn't answer the question, why would Paddock shoot and kill people that had little or nothing to do with him or any of the casinos in Vegas? After hearing the story about Stephen Paddock and the prostitute, I felt like I was picking up a puzzle piece and playing with it. Okay, let's bring the hooker into Paddock's world. He may have thought, if I could sneak that call girl into my room and the hotel staff looks the other way, what else could I sneak in here? Guns? Thinking about the call girl made me wonder if revenge against the casinos as an explanation was just lacking the right puzzle piece for a snug fit. I think it fits if Stephen Paddock is depraved. A depraved mind loves rationalizing its actions. How would Stephen Paddock rationalize killing innocent people? At some point, he might have wondered how many people at the Route 91 Harvest Festival had organ donor marked on their driver's licenses. Could this idea have had a place in Paddock's thinking, like, I'll kill these people, but their organs will save the lives of others? A cold-blooded sociopath's calculation of net zero. In Paddock's mind, perhaps, the books are balanced. Maybe that's what the first mass murdering accountant in world history would think in an attempt to think about one thing and not something else. Ultimately, Stephen Paddock was a fool. Eric and I have talked about Stephen Paddock possibly signaling a message for the casinos on why he did what he did. Could this message have been, I'll ruin you by showing the world how your inadequate security allowed me to do this. Then lawsuits will bankrupt your ass. But as we all know by now, MGM Grand Resorts settled the lawsuits with the families of the victims, and it was the insurance company that paid out. You can't ruin the casinos because it really isn't about them. It's about something else. Paddock was a fool because it's about the altered state of consciousness you go into when you win or lose at gambling. The casinos of Las Vegas and the hunger to gamble in some people are not the same thing. It's about an altered state of consciousness that became a maze for Stephen Paddock, and he got hopelessly lost in it. If this guy thought he could hurt the casinos, hurt their business, smart Mr. Paddock starts coming across as awfully fucking dumb. At this late stage of things, I'm pretty confident Stephen Paddock and Stephen Paddock alone did the shooting. Don't give me this about him being too old or too sick or too weak. He looked like a pretty energetic geezer to me, especially with the opening and closing of the hotel room doors in the hours and days leading up to October 1st. Now, I still haven't made up my mind whether he was manipulated or not, so we'll leave that for another time. Let me know what you think in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, and throw money at me. You know the drill. Have a good one.